Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Ms. Rida Asif, your mathematics teacher from SM Public Academy, Campus 5. So, my dear students, what we are going to discuss today, we are going to discuss chapter number 13, the quadrilaterals. We have already discussed this chapter, but today I'm going to give you the complete explanation about quadrilaterals and its kinds. Okay, so first of all, let's discuss properly about quadrilateral. So what is a quadrilateral? By the definition, what is a quadrilateral? Here you can see the picture of quadrilateral. A figure bounded by four straight lines is called a quadrilateral. Okay, so here A, B, C, D, it is a quadrilateral. Now, what is called the vertices of quadrilateral? Here A, B, C, D, these are the vertices of quadrilaterals. Now, how can we define the vertices? The common points of the line segment are called the vertices of the quadrilateral. Okay, here you can see that this line AB and AD, the common point is A. So here A, B, in the same way C and D. These are called the vertices of quadrilaterals. Okay, only if I talk about only A is the vertex of quadrilateral, and if I'm talking about all the vertices, all the vertex, so the plural of vertex is vertices. Okay. Now, sides of quadrilateral. The segments AB, BC, CA, and DA are called the sides of quadrilateral, like AB here, BC, CD, and DA. These are called the sides of quadrilaterals. Now, what are the opposite sides of quadrilateral? If I show you that in this diagram, side AB and here side CD. These are the opposite sides of quadrilateral. In the same way, side BC is opposite to side DA, right? So these are called the opposite sides of quadrilateral. Okay, so two sides of quadrilateral are called opposite if they do have a common endpoint. When they don't have any common endpoint between them, they are called opposite sides. Now the next one is adjacent or consecutive side. Now, here you can see in this diagram, side AB and side AD. These two sides are called adjacent sides. Okay, these two sides are called adjacent sides, right? Why? Because there is a common endpoint between these two sides, and the common endpoint is A. Okay, so side AD and side AB, these are called adjacent sides because there is one common endpoint between them, right? So here, two sides of quadrilaterals are called adjacents if they have a common endpoint, right? So this is all about quadrilaterals. Now, let's discuss angles of quadrilateral. Here in this diagram, let me show you A, B, C, D. So here there are four angles In this picture, you can see the four angles of quadrilateral: angle A, right? And here angle B is there, angle C is there, and angle D is there, right? So what are called opposite angles? If two angles of quadrilateral don't have common arm, they are called opposite angle. Okay, here you can see that angle A contains the arm DAB and angle C contains the arm DCB. Okay, so arm is not common. Therefore, angle A and angle C, they are opposite angles. They are opposite angles. In the same way, according to this picture, according to this diagram, angle B and D are the opposite angles, right? Angle B and D are the opposite angles. Clear? Next, adjacent and now next is adjacent and consecutive angles. If two angles of quadrilateral have a common arm, they are called adjacent angles. For example, here angle A and angle B, they are adjacent angles. Why? Because here angle A means DAB and angle B means BAC. Angle BA here ABC, right? So they are sharing the common arm. They are sharing the common arm. So these two angles are adjacent angles. Why? Because they have a common arm between them. So in the same way, angle B and angle C, angle B and angle C, they are adjacent angles. In the same way, angle C and angle D are adjacent angles. And in the same way, angle D and angle A, they are adjacent or consecutive angles. Clear, students? Now, what is called the diagonal? The line segment joining the opposite vertices of a quadrilateral is called a diagonal. Okay? The line segment, the joining the opposite vertices of the quadrilateral is called a diagonal. So in this diagram, here you can see this. If I join angle A and angle C with the line segment, okay, if I join the two opposite angles, okay, if I join the two opposite vertices of the quadrilateral by the line segment, this line segment is called a diagonal. In the same way, if the line segment that joins the two opposite vertices, that means B and D, it is called the diagonal of the quadrilateral. Okay, so BD and AC are the diagonals of quadrilateral. Okay. So this is all about quadrilaterals, sides and angles of quadrilaterals and diagonals. Now let's discuss kinds of quadrilateral. We are going to discuss three kinds of quadrilateral here. Number one, parallelogram, like this. Number two is rectangle. And number three is a square. So let's discuss one by one. What is called a parallelogram? A quadrilateral whose both pair of opposite sides are parallel. It is called a parallelogram. A parallelogram is denoted by this symbol. Here you can see that two parallel lines are there and M is written over there. Okay, it is denoted by parallelogram ABCD, right? A, B, C, D, right? So here in this picture, you can see that a quadrilateral whose opposite sides are parallel. Here you can see that AB side and CD. These two sides are parallel, okay? And side BC and side AD, they are parallel to each other. So this quadrilateral is called a parallelogram, having opposite sides parallel, having opposite sides parallel. So symbolically, we can say that side AB is parallel to side CD and side BC is parallel to side AD. Am I right? Okay. So now let's discuss the properties of parallelogram. So property number one, opposite sides of parallelogram are congruent. Okay. The first property is also the definition that the opposite sides are parallel. So if they are parallel, they are congruent too. We can say that side AB is parallel and it is also congruent to side CD, and in the same way, side BC is equal to side AD. Okay. Number two, opposite angle of parallelogram are congruent. Okay. Opposite angle means angle A and angle C are congruent, right? Then angle B and angle D are congruent, right? Opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. Now, any two adjacent angles of parallelogram are supplementary. Okay. For example, angle A plus angle B. Supplementary means the sum of two angles must be equal to 180 degree. So angle A plus angle B is equals to 180 degree. In the same way, we can say that angle B plus angle C. Angle B plus angle C is equals to again 180 degree, or we can say that angle C plus angle D is equals to 180 degree. Okay, so this is the property that any two adjacent angles of parallelogram are supplementary. Supplementary means sum is equals to 180 degree. Now the diagonals. The fourth property, the last property of parallelogram is of diagonal. Okay, the diagonal of the parallelogram bisect each other. Okay, what is the meaning of bisect each other? Here you can see the diagonal number one, AC, okay, and diagonal number two is BD. These two diagonal intersect each other at point O, and if these two diagonals intersect each other at point O, we can see that this measurement OA and OC, they both are equal. That means that these two diagonals are bisecting each other. Okay, they are bisecting each other. So we can say that the two diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so this is all about the properties of parallelogram. Now let's discuss the next quadrilateral. The next one is a rectangle. Now a rectangle is a parallelogram. A rectangle is a parallelogram whose all angles are right angle. Whose all angles are right angle. Okay. Whose all angles here in this diagram, you can see the rectangle. Here, the angles A, B, C, and D, they all are equal to, all the angles are equal to 90 degree. These all angles are equal to 90 degree, right? And in rectangle, the opposite sides are congruent. That means AB, CD, they are congruent sides, and BC and AD, these two sides are congruent. So this is also the property of the parallelogram, having opposite sides congruent. So that's why it is written that the rectangle is a parallelogram. Okay, but all the angles of rectangles are of 90 degrees. So we can say that it's a parallelogram having all the angles are right angle, whose all angles are right angle. Okay, so let's discuss the properties of rectangle. So students, if a rectangle is a parallelogram, then the starting four properties of rectangle are similar to the properties of parallelogram. Okay, why? Because a rectangle is a parallelogram whose all angles are right angle. That means it's a parallelogram. Okay, so the properties of parallelogram are included in properties of rectangle. So the starting four properties are similar, right? So what is the starting four properties? That the opposite sides of rectangle are congruent. Yes, it is congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. That means angle A, angle C, they are congruent. Angle B, angle D, yes, they are congruent. Now property number 3, any two adjacent angles of rectangle are supplementary. Yes, obviously, if I add angle A plus angle B to 90 plus 90, we get 180 degree. It's correct. Now, the fourth property, which is also the property of parallelogram, that the diagonals of rectangle bisect each other. Okay, the diagonals of rectangle bisect each other. Right? That means here OA is equals to OC and OB is equals to OD, right? Now, the fifth property is that all the angles of rectangle are congruent. All the angles are congruent means that all the angles are equal to, here you can see that all the angles are equal to 90 degree. So here, measurement angle A, measurement angle B, C and D, they all are equal to 90 degree. So all the angles of the rectangles are congruent. Okay. So the last property of rectangle is again of diagonals. Okay. So the last property is of diagonal. The property is the diagonal of rectangle are congruent. The diagonals of the rectangle are congruent. What is meant by congruent? Here, AC, that means the diagonal AC and BD, both are equal. Both are congruent means both are equal. If AC is equals to 10 centimeter, then BD is also is equals to 10 centimeter. Clear, everybody? So, for the rectangle's diagonal, there are two properties that they bisect each other as well as they are congruent. But for the parallelogram, they only bisect each other. They are not congruent. They only bisect each other. Clear, everybody? So, the students, after rectangle, we are going to discuss the next quadrilateral, that is a square. So a square, what is a square? A square is a rectangle whose all sides are congruent. Okay. A square is a rectangle. Here in this diagram, you can see that all the sides are now congruent. Okay. But the angles are all equal to right angle. That means are of 90 degree. So it is a rectangle having all the sides are congruent. So if the square is a rectangle, that means all the properties of the rectangles are also included in square. So here the properties of square, here you can see that there are 8 properties of square, in which starting 6 properties are there, which we have already discussed in rectangle. That number 1, opposite sides are congruent. Yes, opposite side AB and CD are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. So A and angle C are congruent. Now any two adjacent angles of square are supplementary. Yes, A plus B is equals to 180 degree, because all the angles again are of 90 degree. So the diagonals of the square bisect each other. That means OA and OC are equal. Next one, all the angles are congruent. That means angle A, angle B, C, and angle D are is equals to 90 degree. Right? Now, 7th and 8th property. 7th property is all the sides are congruent. That means AB is equals to BC is equals to CD is equals to DA. Okay. These all sides are congruent. These all sides are congruent. Now the last property of square is of diagonals. Okay. Diagonals. The diagonal of the square are perpendicular to each other. Perpendicular means here AC and BD, when they intersect each other, they are perpendicular. Perpendicular means that here the angles are of 90 degree. Here these angles are of 90 degree. Okay. Their diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So what are the 3 properties for the diagonals of the square? That they bisect each other, as well as they are congruent and they are perpendicular to each other. So if I ask you that the diagonals of rectangle are perpendicular to each other, so what will you say? Yes, it's false. Okay. And if I ask you the diagonals of parallelogram bisect each other, yes, it's true. The diagonals of square perpendicular to each other, yes, it's true. So properly you have to learn these properties properly. Okay. The properties of these quadrilaterals are given in your book on page number 166, 167, and 168. Okay. So learn these properties properly, learn the definitions properly. Thank you so much, my dear ones. Take care of yourself and Allah Hafiz.